Welcome to Math 0090. My name is Oscar Torres, and today I'll be covering all the information you need to know for the first day of class. As a developmental course, we will be covering a lot of fundamental math concepts that you'll be using in future math classes and other related subjects. A few of those concepts include arithmetic operations, so adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, algebraic concepts, geometry, etc. Regarding the materials for this course, you do not need a textbook, so don't go out and buy a textbook for the class. And if you've already bought a textbook, feel free to return it at any point in the semester. So instead of a textbook, you're going to have an ebook that's accessible within the program that we'll be using throughout the class. That's called the ALEKS program. So we'll be using that program. You don't need to pay for it, but pretty much everything that we do in this class is going to be done through the ALEKS program. Because of the way this course is structured, not just for my class session, but for any instructor that's teaching this course, you must have access to a computer with a webcam and a microphone. I had a few students from previous semesters who had microphones that weren't working properly, and they had to borrow someone else's laptop to do their assignments. So make sure you're using something that has a functioning webcam and a functioning microphone. So all assignments and exams will be done on a computer through the ALEKS program. If you need a device with a webcam and a microphone, you can fill out this form. So you can visit this website and you can fill out a form that will allow you to check out either a Chromebook or a tablet through TCC themselves. You don't need to pay for the device, but you do have a certain time period in which you need to return it. Otherwise, they will charge you for it. Because of the ongoing pandemic, all of our sessions will be held online only. So I'll be available Monday through Thursday to answer any questions that you have through Blackboard Collaborate. The way you access that online session is simply by going to my.tccd.edu. Once you're there, you click on this course page, the Math 0090, and one of the first links that you'll see is something that says Join Online Session. And if you click on Join Online Session, you'll automatically be placed into the live session that I'm holding. So the hours in which I'll be available are listed here. Now this video is going out to 3 different sessions simply because I don't want to repeat the same exact information 3 times. For section 11000, we'll be meeting Monday and Wednesdays from 8 to 9:20. For section 11005, we'll be meeting Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9:30 to 10:50 in the mornings. And for my weekend sections, section 12101, we'll be meeting on Saturdays from 8 to 9 a.m. If those times don't work for you, you can also just contact me and we might be able to meet up shortly after you send me an email. One thing I do want to point out is that even though I list these hours under 3 different sections, because we're meeting online and you guys are doing the exact same material, feel free to stop by any of these sessions and I'll be able to both consider you as present for the week and I'll be able to help you out with the material. So on paper, even though this is the hours for the section 11000, feel free to stop by during the Tuesday, Thursday sessions at this time. And again, I'll count you present and it'll be just like if you attended any of the other sessions. Same thing with the Saturday group too. So again, these hours are completely interchangeable. Feel free to stop by whenever you want and I'll be able to help you out. Attendance to any live online sessions that I hold during these hours is completely optional. But even then, I do recommend that for the first week, you at least stop by so that I know that you're participating and receiving my emails. Aside from these sessions, you can contact me during office hours as well. So my official office hours are during these sessions. On Monday and Wednesdays, it's in the morning from 9:30 to 10 a.m. And I hold my office hours on Tuesdays from 9 to 9:30 a.m. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter what session you're in, you can join any of these office hours. So don't feel like you're just restricted to one of them. So throughout the semester, I'll be uploading videos on the Blackboard page that covers important math topics. So the way this class is structured is every student might be working on a different topic, but at one point or another, you're bound to come across the same sort of topic with another student. So if you get stuck on the material, I do encourage you to ask me to make a video tutorial, and I'll go over the topic that you're currently not understanding. So I just mentioned that attendance is optional, and that's partially true. You don't need to attend any of my live online sessions. With that said, as an instructor, I am required to take attendance for my class. So even though you don't show up to the live online sessions, that's perfectly fine. You're not going to be penalized for that at all. But in order for me to take attendance, I do need to have these rules in place. For those of you taking 11000 or 11005, attendance will be taken 2 days throughout the week. So I'll be available for 5 days. I'll be available Monday through Thursday and Saturday. If you show up to one of those class meetings, doesn't matter which one of those sessions you show up on, you'll be counted as present for that day. Okay, so that's if you show up for a live session. This will be the rule that applies to you. Now, if you can't make it to the online session, that's perfectly fine. As long as you complete 1 hour of work within the ALEKS program, you'll be excused for 1 day of that week. So on paper, if you actually show up, you'll be counted as present. If you don't show up, but you still do your work, you'll be excused for the day. These two things are pretty much the same. Now, they're labeled differently because one means that you actually showed up to the session that's being present, and the other one just means that you still got your work done. But in terms of scholarships or any sort of academic standing, these two are interchangeable. For all intents and purposes, an excused absence is the same as being present. So if you complete 1 hour of work within the ALEKS program, you'll be excused for 1 day of that week. Now, because I am talking about the weekday courses, I need to take attendance for 2 days of the week. That means in order for you to be present for the entire week, you need to complete not just 1 hour, but 2 hours of work throughout the week to be considered as present for 2 days of that week. So those are my weekday courses. 2 days of the week, which means you show up to 2 live sessions, or you just complete 2 hours of work within the ALEKS program. For my weekend classes, 12101, attendance will be taken only once throughout the week. So just like I mentioned earlier, you can join any of my live sessions for any of those 5 days, Monday through Saturday. But you're still required to put in 2 hours of work to be considered present for the week. Alternatively, you can show up to one of those class meetings and I'll count you as being present for the week. If you end up not being able to make 4 hours of class sessions, or if you do not complete 4 hours of work within the ALEKS program, then you'll end up getting an automated warning through email that tells you that you've been absent for more than 15% of the class sessions. If you end up getting this warning, I don't want you to stress out over it. Because of COVID and the fact that we're taking online classes instead of in-person classes, I'm not going to be dropping anybody from the course. So if you are concerned about failing the course, you will have to withdraw yourself from the class. I'm not going to do it for you. So again, if you end up getting an email that warns you about missing class, don't worry about it. Just make sure you get your work done at some point or another. Regarding tutoring, there's a few different ways of receiving tutoring for the class. One is by joining my online live sessions, and I'll be able to help you out during those sessions. Another way is by using TCC staff tutoring. So it's an online service that's offered at these hours, and I have instructions on how to join them within the Blackboard page. So I'm not going to go over it in this video, but there's a few different steps that are outlined in a PDF document. So you can find this again on your Blackboard page. Alternatively, if you can't make any of these hours, then there is a 24/7 tutoring service that TCC pays for, but they don't provide themselves. So you access this through the Blackboard page, similar to the other one. But again, it's not ran by TCC. And all that means is that the people are going to be able to help you out with the material, but they don't necessarily know all of the requirements for each individual class. Unlike the TCC sessions, which actually have staff that understand all the material that we go over in class. So if you can't make these hours, go ahead and try tutoring 24/7 and they should be able to help you out. Regarding the grades for this course, this class is essentially a pass/fail course. So on the transcript, it'll show up as either you receiving credit, CR, or receiving no credit, NC. So as I mentioned earlier, all of the work that you do will be completed within the ALEKS program. To actually earn credit for the class, you must achieve all of the following requirements. So you need to make sure you complete 90% of the course topics. By the end of the semester, it should be at 348 topics. On top of that, you must score at least a 70% on the final exam. And within the ALEKS program, instead of calling it the final exam, they just call it an exit test. So you must score at least a 70 on the exit test, and you must have an overall average in the class of at least a 70%. So you must meet every single one of these requirements to pass the class. That means it's technically possible to have a 90% as your grade in the class, but still not earn credit for the class. So it sounds a little confusing, but all that means is that if all you did was take the test and get 90s or higher on your exams, but then you actually didn't complete any topics, right? Let's say you completed 10 topics and you scored all 90s on your test, then that's not enough for me to consider you to pass the class. You need to both pass the class and complete your weekly assignments. Regarding your grades, I mentioned that you need to have an overall average of at least a 70 in the course, and this is where that percentage comes from. So every week in class, you are expected to put in a total of 9 hours of work within the ALEKS program. And that includes your tests. So if you take a test and you spend 2 hours on the test, that means you only need to put in 7 more hours of work into the topics for that week. So these are called your time goals. And again, every week, you're expected to put in a total of 9 hours of work within the ALEKS program. Even if you happen to not be able to put in those 9 hours, that's only worth 2% of your overall grade. That means you can still make a 98% in this class if you aren't able to put in 9 hours of work. After time goes, you have your PI progress. And this is basically the amount of topics that you need to have completed by a certain deadline. So instead of me just reading this off, let me give you a visual of how this works. So at the beginning of the semester, you can think of it as having a progress bar just like this, where you're going to have to complete a certain number of topics by a certain date. So at the beginning of the semester, we're obviously here. We haven't completed any topics. We've completed 0 topics, which means that we have 0% of the topics completed. So we all start at 0 and we work our topic count all the way up to 97. Now we do have a deadline for this. If I scroll up a little, we'll see that our PI Progress 1, our 25% goal, is due on February the 9th. So the date for this is actually 2/9, it's February the 9th. So by this date, we need to have 97 topics completed, which is the same as 25% of the material for the class. So on February the 9th, we take test 1 after we've completed 97 topics, and then we move on from that. So after this date, we should have around 97 topics completed. So we have to work our topic count up to 193 topics. And the due date for this is up here, it's 3/10. So March 10th. So on March 10th, we should have 193 topics completed, and we end up taking test 2. Afterwards, we repeat the process. So we're at 193 topics, and you need to work your way up to 289 topics, which is 75% of the material. The due date for this is 4/8. So on April 8th, you should have this amount of topics completed, and then you need to take test 3 by the end of that day. Now, test 4 breaks the pattern a little bit. Technically, to complete every single topic in the class, you need to complete 386 topics. That's to have 100% of the material completed. For my class, I'm not requiring you to complete everything. I only require you to complete 90% of the material. So the due date for this exit test or for this final exam is either 5/12, so May 12th for my weekday classes, or May 9th for my weekend classes. So the only reason these are different is because the final exam schedules for TCC are different for each session. So on either of those days, ideally you would have 348 topics completed, which covers 90% of the overall material for the class. So it can be a little confusing, but that's basically what this entire table goes over. If you notice, all of the PyProgress dates are exactly the same as the exam dates. And the description of them is just like I went over a second ago. By this date, you need to complete this number of topics, and then you need to take that test. By this date, you need to complete this number of topics and complete this test, and so on. So regarding the exams, there are 4 exams in total, or 4 tests in total. Each test will contain 30 questions, and you'll have a 3-hour time limit to complete those tests. Now, you can start at any point before midnight of that deadline. So if we look up here, test 1, the due date is 2/9 or February the 9th. That means you can take the test at this date or any time before then. But as soon as it turns into the 10th, so midnight of this day, as soon as it turns into February 10th, then you've reached the deadline and you can't take the test anymore. These exams will be proctored virtually, which means that they'll be recorded and monitored through the Respondus program, which is also known as the Lockdown browser. So you are going to be required to use this Lockdown browser to take your exam, and for the most part, there's no getting around that. You're going to need to install that program. I'll send you guys more information on how to do this in a separate document or video. But even as soon as you try taking any one of your tests, the first thing the system will do is check whether you have the Lockdown browser enabled or not. If you don't have it installed, it's not going to let you take the test. So during these exams, you're not allowed to use any notes, and you are not allowed to use any calculators either. As I mentioned earlier, all of the exams can be taken at any point before these due dates mentioned up here or up here. They're the exact same thing. And I'm repeating myself again, but as I mentioned earlier, you cannot rely on only taking the test. You still need to complete 90% of the course topics. Otherwise, you will not pass the class. So regarding the ALEKS program, I already have a tutorial posted up on Blackboard. It's only a PDF. It's not a video because if it's a video, it would just be me typing in my personal information. So go ahead and view that and follow it if you haven't already done so. Once you start the ALEKS program, anything that's for a grade will require you to put a password in there. So if it doesn't ask you for a password, then it's not for a grade. And here I mentioned that it might affect your topic count. I will talk a little bit more about that later on. I mentioned this earlier, but I'm repeating myself one more time. You are expected to work a total of 9 hours in the ALEKS program throughout the week. And this goes for all classes. The first 2 hours will count towards your weekly attendance. So every week, the minimum amount of work that you should be putting in the class is 2 hours. Not an hour and a half, not an hour 40 minutes, but 2 hours. Regarding the test, you do need to take the test by their due date, even if the number of topics that you have doesn't match what I expect you to have. So what that means, if I go back over here, let's say the test 1 due date is coming up and you only have 80 topics. Now, ideally, you would have 97 topics, but if you have 80 topics, you should still go ahead and take test 1 because you're not going to be able to take it later on. Now, you won't be as prepared as if you had completed 97 topics, but the point is, when we reach these deadlines, you need to go ahead and take the test regardless of how many topics you've completed. And regarding this last thing that I have here, it says that as long as you've reached 348 topics at any point before you reach the exit test, then I will consider you to have fulfilled the 90% topic requirement to pass the class. And all that saying is, let's say one day you have 348 topics, but then you end up doing something that brings it down to 320 topics. The fact that you completed 348 topics to begin with will tell me that you have met that 90% topic requirement. So when you reach this number, You'll have permission to take your final exam and you can finish the class early, even if your number ends up dropping later on. So throughout the semester, the ALEKS program will assign you something called a progress knowledge check. And you can think of this as being similar to a non-graded pop quiz. So if you ever see this pop up in the ALEKS program, please note that it is not for a grade. These knowledge checks occur after completing 20 topics and putting in 9 hours of work within the ALEKS program. So they're almost like a pop quiz that can propel your progress forward by increasing your topic count if you do well on them. But if you do really, really bad on these pop-up quizzes, then it'll undo some of your progress. So just like I mentioned earlier, it really is possible to go from 348 to something like 190 topics if you're not careful. So during these knowledge checks, you are free to use your notes. Now, I still recommend that you don't use a calculator. You're not going to be recorded for this particular part of the ALEKS program. But to better prepare yourself for the test, I recommend you don't use your calculator, but you are allowed to use your notes. The last thing that I have mentioned here is anytime you're notified of a knowledge check, you have the option of putting it off for 24 hours, but you will have to complete it eventually, so try to not put it off for too long. So we're pretty much at the end of the video. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you follow the how to register for the ALEKS program tutorial that I typed up and posted on Blackboard. You can find it under the ALEKS information tab that's on the left-hand side of the course page when you first log in. Once you've registered to the ALEKS program, go ahead and do the tool tutorial. This will automatically pop up when you log into the ALEKS program. So finish that and then follow up by completing this initial knowledge check. So after you do the tools tutorial, this will pop up and it'll ask you if you want to start it. If you have time, I recommend that you go ahead and do that. You're going to have to do it eventually. And this is almost like a pre-test for the class. So it's not going to be for a grade and it's not going to be proctored at all. So it's not going to be recorded in any sort of manner. During this test, I strongly recommend that you do not use a calculator. So don't use a calculator, don't get any external help, don't look up any answers, just do your best on it. If you are dishonest, like let's say you get a lot of these problems correct, even though you don't really know how to do them, then it'll only make the ALEKS program way more difficult at the beginning of the semester. Now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Do your best on this, but only use the knowledge that you have. Don't try to get any sort of external help. So go ahead and complete this knowledge check, ideally by the end of the first week of class. So I will be available in the mornings during the times that I mentioned earlier in this video. If you have time, feel free to stop by and ask any questions that you have. Otherwise, you can continue working on the ALEKS topics at your own pace. So complete this information that I have on the screen by the end of the first week, and I'll be sending out an email with more information within the first few days of class. So thanks again for viewing the video. I should have covered pretty much everything that you have on your syllabus, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through Blackboard. Send me an email or send me a message through there.